Hey guys, tonight we raid across wind-carved steppes, under endless stars, saddles sore and half asleep. You can almost feel the coarse leather reins in your fingers, the dry whisper of hooves against packed earth, and the constant flutter of the sealed leather pouch tied to your belt. You're part of something ancient, enormous, and vaguely exhausting. Welcome to the Postal service of the Mongol Empire. And just so you know, this isn't your neighborhood mail route. This is the YAM, a relay system that could carry imperial commands, diplomatic letters, or just a particularly urgent tax notice across thousands of miles. You're a courier now and you probably won't survive this job unless you ride like your life depends on it. Because it kind of does. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is. I'm curious which time zones are getting the best naps. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're astride a wiry, tough little Mongol pony, not much to look at, but it runs like it's got a grudge against the wind. Your orders are simple: take this pouch, don't open it, and ride to the next YAM station. Then switch horses, hand over the pouch, and keep going. Except of course, it's never that simple. The sun has just risen over the vast steppes, throwing gold across the grass. Your boots are already damp from dew and regret. In your saddlebag, nestled between two smoked meat buns and what used to be a reasonably clean sock, lies the Gurjay gleaming bronze tablet with official markings. That thing is your all-access pass. With it, you can demand fresh horses, hot meals, and shelter at any YAM station in the Empire. Without it, you're just a very dusty guy asking strangers for food. The Mongol postal system called the YAM was one of the most impressive communication networks the medieval world had ever seen. Set up in the early 13th century under Genghis Khan, it was designed for speed, efficiency, and terrifying precision. Think medieval FedEx, but with arrows and war drums. Each courier would ride for about 40 kilometers before handing off the mail and hopping onto a new horse at the next station. Historians estimate there were over 1,400 of these stations across the empire at its peak. You were never more than half a day's ride from a fresh horse, a bowl of fermented mare's milk, and some extremely skeptical locals. The trick, of course, was keeping the horses alive and the couriers from deserting. YAM riders were under strict orders not to dawdle. And if you thought traffic was bad now, imagine sharing your road with a Mongol military column. You better move faster, be trampled under hoof while trying to decipher whether the dried meat you're eating is yak or your last horse. And no, you don't get to pick your route. The Imperial Route Planners, let's call them the world's first logistics nerds, calculated distances, elevations, and seasonal hazards. Some roads were perfectly flat across endless plains. Others snaked through icy mountain passes that made your toenails clench just looking at them. Your first destination today is a modest way station somewhere near the Orkhon Valley. It's little more than a wooden structure with a smoke hole in the roof and exactly one blanket per person. You're pretty sure one of those blankets is still haunted by the previous user's dreams. But you're not here for comfort. You're here for speed. Your pony gallops like it's being chased by thunder. The wind lashes your face. Your fingers grip the reins like they're the last clean things you own. And in the distance, you spot a plume of smoke, station smoke. You make it by mid-morning. The stable boy barely looks up as you dismount and toss the reins to him. A fresh horse is already waiting, snorting and stamping. You exchange a grunt with the station manager, flash your gurage, and down a gulp of something milky that may or may not be alcoholic. You've got 5 minutes before you're back on the road. No time to stretch. No time to ask about the weather or, say, when someone last cleaned the latrines. You ride. Historians still argue whether the YAM was truly a postal system in the modern sense or more of a high-speed information relay for the elite. Most letters weren't written by sweethearts or pen pals. They were imperial commands, tax orders, battle instructions. But some were surprisingly mundane: food deliveries, birth announcements, or invitations to seasonal horse races. One fringe theory claims the YAM also carried coded messages between secret Buddhist enclaves hiding from persecution. There's little hard proof, but it's just weird enough to be true. As the day wears on, you start to feel every bump in the trail. Your knees itch, your back is plotting mutiny, and you've started talking to your horse enough for comfort, just for company. Don't look at me like that, or Jijin, you mumble to the horse. I didn't invent the job. In the afternoon, you pass a lone traveler heading in the opposite direction. You both nod, sullen and dusty, like two wind-blasted ghosts haunting the same road in different directions. At night, you rest at another station, this one bigger. They have stew. It tastes like despair and pickled onions. You sleep on the floor with 6 other couriers, all snoring in harmony like a baritone chore. Your dreams are full of galloping. And so it goes: ride, deliver, switch horses, repeat. By now, your thighs have made peace with pain. The pouch thumps rhythmically at your side. You feel like a very tired artery in the beating heart of an empire. You wake before the sun. Again. The blanket barely warmed you through the night. and someone definitely stole your boots while you were dreaming. Thankfully, they just moved them closer to the fire, but for a second there you thought you'd be finishing your route barefoot. You grumble something impolite in 3 languages as you shove your feet back into them still warm, oddly damp. Never ask why. Out you go, into the frigid pred-on chill of the steppe. You saddle your new horse, a shaggy creature with one ear that refuses to stay up. You name him Tilt. He doesn't seem thrilled, but then again, neither are you. The Yam stations, those vital nerve endings of the Empire's communication body, are scattered across thousands of miles. From the forests of Siberia to the rocky deserts of Persia, the Mongols built outposts every 25 to 40 kilometers. It was like a medieval breadcrumb trail made of oats, horse sweat, and an alarming amount of fermented dairy. Each station was a little different, depending on where you were. In lush pastures, the buildings were sturdier, almost cozy wooden beams, felt rugs, an actual roof. In more hostile areas, you got a shack made of bones, straw, and prayer. If you were lucky, there was a yak skull nailed above the door to scare off evil spirits or tax collectors. Possibly both. Some stations had permanent staff, horse tenders, cooks, scribes, even grooms. Others were run by local nomads hired by the Empire, who saw the postal riders as a necessary nuisance, like distant cousins who show up without warning and eat all your dried cheese. You arrive at one such station just after dawn. It's nothing more than a yurt with a fence and 2 sleepy horses tied to a rail. A child peeks out from behind a flap. Her mother shushes her and steps out with a bowl of arag, the fermented mare's milk you'll never quite learn to love. It tastes like warm yogurt, and regret. You drink it anyway. Inside, the station keeper records your arrival on a wax tablet. He eyes your pouch and your garage but doesn't ask questions. Is seen worse. Probably carried worse. One legend says a writer once delivered a pouch filled with nothing but silk ribbons and a single peacock feather. No explanation. The Empire had its quirks. You stretch briefly, just enough to pop something in your lower spine and saddle up again. You're off before your breakfast has even finished arguing with your stomach. The Yam system worked because it was precise. Every horse was supposed to be fresh. Every raider alert. Every mile accounted for. Some stations had bell towers or fire beacons to signal the next post. Others relied on runners to pass the word. A rider could average 200 to 300 kilometers in a single day if the weather and their kidney showed up. And yes, the Mongols recorded the movements. Genghis Khan wasn't just a conqueror, he was a data guy. The entire relay system had ledgers, logs, inventory charts. Couriers like you were expected to keep notes. Lose a horse. Record it. Break a strap. Record it. Accidentally ride into a bear den. Also record it, preferably in past tense. Of course, not everything went by the book. A courier once showed up to a Persian station with a pouch that smelled faintly of onions and blood. The contents: an imperial recipe for dumplings. Apparently Gait Khan had very specific culinary cravings. Historians still argue whether that was an official mission or just a really elaborate prank on the kitchen staff. Your current ride is smooth for a few miles, the wind at your back, the sun climbing lazily. Then the terrain changes, rolling hills turn to marshland, and your horse starts making noises that say, "No thank you." But you press on, weaving through the reeds, mud splashing up your legs. You're wet, annoyed, and increasingly unsure if the last station's stew was beef or very persuasive mushroom. You stop briefly at an auxiliary station, just a lone post with a carved symbol of a hawk. No building, no staff, just a tether point and a weather-beaten message nailed to a pole: next horse 7 km north. Do not wait here. Wolves. Great. Motivated by both imperial duty and not getting eaten, you ride hard toward the next proper station. The sun is high when you arrive. You're given a new horse, larger, grumpier, with hooves the size of soup bowls. You name this one Thunder Hooves. Again, not thrilled. You eat a quick meal, some kind of pastry stuffed with minced meat and wild onion, and sit with 2 other couriers around the fire. One of them is missing part of an eyebrow. No one asks why. Instead, you exchange news in low voices. One writer says there was a storm that took down 2 stations west of here. Another says a falconer passed through earlier with a pouch marked top priority, do not drop. Classic red flag. You laugh softly, knowing that pouch probably contained either a royal marriage proposal or a politely worded declaration of war. Possibly both. And here's the thing. You never read the mail. Even if it smells like perfume. Even if it's wrapped in silk. Even if it jiggles suspiciously and pee. There are tales of riders who did and disappeared mysteriously. Maybe punishment. Maybe superstition. Maybe because the Empire had a lot of cliffs and not much patience. Historians still debate how much of the Yam was centralized and how much relied on local governance. Some argue it was a marvel of top-down infrastructure. Others suggest it worked only because local communities cooperated out of fear, loyalty, or plain pragmatism. You don't get to weigh in. You're too busy riding. As evening falls, you dismount at a large hub station with actual bunks and praise the eternal blue sky indoor heat. The manager offers you tea and dry clothes. You nod in thanks, collapse onto a padded mat, and let the day slide off your bones. Outside, your pouch sits by the hearth, safe and sealed. Inside it, a letter, a scroll, a secret, a story not yours to read. You fall asleep wondering what it says. You wake to the crackle of hooves in the courtyard, and the smell of something suspiciously like boiled cabbage. It's still dark outside, but in the Mongol Postal system, time is more of a suggestion than a right. You sit up slowly, your muscles offering a firm no thank you, and fumble for your boots. Again. Your pouch is still there. Still sealed. Still slightly singed from sitting too close to the fire last night. You run your fingers over the leather still intact. Good. You're still in the game. As you munch on a piece of dried meat that could plausibly be described as edible, a familiar face walks in, the station master. Tall, with a shaved head and eyes like a hawk that's seen things. He's holding a scroll. You recognize the blue thread binding its high priority. He nods at you. You ride today. Special packet. For Karakoram. You blink. Karakoram. The capital. The beating heart of the Mongol Empire. Where imperial decrees are born and legends go to drink themselves into oblivion. You nod back, swallowing the last of the mystery meat. This is no longer just a dusty relay run. You saddle up before dawn, slipping the second pouch into your bag alongside the first. It's heavier. You wonder, briefly, if it contains royal orders, a coded message, or maybe Genghis Khan's recipe for bone broth. You'll never know. The ride begins smooth. The terrain here is flat, grassy, and deceptive in its calm. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls not a menace, just as a reminder that the steppe belongs to no one. The silence gives you time to think about the man behind all this, Genghis Khan. The big guy. The reason you're here, freezing parts of yourself you didn't know existed. People remember him as a conqueror, a general, a fearsome warrior who burned cities and broke empires. But fewer know he was also a systems guy. A logistics genius. A man who understood that an empire isn't held together by swords, it's held together by information. The Yam was his brainchild. A network of roads, stations, horses, and couriers spanning from the Pacific to the Black Sea. He didn't just want messages delivered, he wanted them delivered predictably, reliably, fast. Historians still argue whether Genghis Khan modeled the Yam after the Chinese imperial courier systems or if he took inspiration from ancient Persian networks. Maybe both. Maybe neither. One thing's clear, he took a chaotic sprawl of tribes and territories and gave it a nervous system. And that nervous system, that's you. You push on through a stretch of semi-forested hills. Your new horse, Thunder Hooves II, you're not original, just tired as surprisingly nimble. You ford a stream, narrowly avoid a patch of quicksand, and cross paths with a trader hauling bundles of silk and salt. He nods, sees the pouch at your side, and lets you pass first. That's the power of the Gurage. You reach another station by mid-morning. This one's busier, more like a market post than a rest stop. There are livestock pens, scribes with ink-stained hands, a guy trying to sell pine cones. You flash your Gurage again, and they usher you inside. Hot food, warm water, a clean blanket. You allow yourself 15 minutes, max. Then you're off again. One fun little fact. The Mongols loved using colored threads to signal priority. Blue thread meant urgent imperial business. Red was military. Gold, well, that was either extremely high status or someone had way too much free time and liked pretty colors. You've got blue and red today. Lucky you. There's a section of road ahead known as the Bone Trail. Not because of skeleton cell, not just because of it, because it winds through a pass lined with strange stone markers. Some say they're ancient tombs. Others say they're warnings from a time before Genghis. Most couriers just try not to look at them too long. You follow suit. The wind picks up, cutting through your cloak like paper. Your hands are numb, your nose is considering divorce, and your horse keeps glancing at you like this is all somehow your fault. You whisper to the pouch, you better be worth it. Mid-afternoon, you meet another rider coming from the opposite direction. He looks worse than you, mud-streaked, one arm in a sling, but still grinning like he just survived a thunderstorm and wants to brag about it. Watch out for the river bend, he says. Ice broke this morning. Nearly lost my left foot. Or my right. Honestly, I stopped keeping track. You thank him. Continue on. The river bend is treacherous, but you edge through it carefully. A plank bridge helps. Barely. Somewhere in the current, something shiny catches your eye, a metal buckle, maybe. Someone else's bad day. As the shadows grow long, you spot the glimmer of rooftops ahead. It's more sprawling than you imagine. The walls are low, more symbolic than defensive, but the city bustles. Traders, monks, soldiers, and envoys all move in a strangely choreographed chaos. Smoke rises from hearts. Bells ring. And pigeons, so many pigeons. You reach the central post station. It's palatial compared to the others. Someone even greets you with tea. You hand over the pouches. Both are received with solemn nods. One disappears into a back room. The other, a bearded official, opens it, reads the top line, and immediately calls for a scribe. You're dismissed before you can even finish your tea. That's how you know the message mattered. You step outside. The wind has calmed. The city hums with quiet urgency. You've done your part. One scroll at a time, this empire moves. You may be nameless, dusty, and permanently chapped, but today, you were the thread stitching it all together. You leave Karakorum with a lighter pouch but a heavier horseplood. This one's called, though you didn't name him. Someone at the central station just looked at the horse, sighed deeply, and said, "This is Plod now." And frankly, it fits. Plod moves like he's auditioning to be a statue. But you're in no rush. Your next assignment is less urgent. You're to accompany a caravan headed west, delivering packets along the way. It's a slower pace but longer range, and with it comes your newest travel companion. A shiny new garage. This one is made of silver. Intricately engraved, polished to a mirror finish. When you flash it in the sunlight, even the yaks blink. It's an official passport of the Empire Mongol Express class. It says, "Don't question me, don't delay me, don't even look at me too long." These garage tablets were the secret weapons of the Yam. Unlike a wax seal or a paper credential, a garage was unmistakable. You couldn't fake one easily. They were forged with markings specific to the issuer. Some were bronze, some silver, a few rare ones even gold. They carried the Great Khan's authority and basically meant, give this person what they need or start running now. Yours bears the seal of Gede Khan himself. Probably a copy, but the message is clear. You're carrying important cargo, even if it's just letters and awkwardly shaped tax receipts. Historians still debate whether garage holders could actually command food and shelter anywhere, or only at Yam stations. Some believe the privilege extended to private homes. Imagine being woken up at 2 a.m. by a dusty man demanding soup and a new horse. Others argue that was propaganda to scare local lords into cooperating. You test it at the next village. There's no Yam post, but you hold up your tablet like a badge of honor. The head woman eyes it, squints at you, then nods. Minutes later you're seated on a woven mat, eating something that tastes suspiciously like pickled goat. Success. As you ride, the caravan stretches out behind you. Merchants, guards, a few monks, and a camel with boundary issues. The road turns rocky, dust rising in soft puffs with each hoofbeat. You feel less like a courier now, more like a diplomatic ghost drifting through towns with tidings from afar. At one stop, you deliver a sealed scroll to a local governor. He opens it, reads silently, then bursts out laughing. You raise an eyebrow. He waves the scroll. "It's from my brother. He says my horse smells like fermented cabbage and is sending it. Better one." Family drama, sponsored by the Yam. One scroll you carry is wrapped in red silk. The man who gave it to you said it must not be opened except by the recipient. He also gave you 3 coins and a strange look. No one's quite sure what's in the red silk packet. Some say they're love letters between nobles. Others say they're death warrants dressed up in Satan. You try not to think about it. The roads twist through a hilly region. At the top of a ridge, you pause. Below you, stretching toward the horizon, are the veins of empire dusty tracks, river crossings, glinting roofs of distant stations. You imagine each line carrying stories, orders, promises, all strung together by couriers like you. The Mongol Empire's communications network wasn't just for internal use. Diplomatic envoys and foreign visitors were also issued garage. Marco Polo allegedly had one during his travels, though historians still argue if that's true or just a medieval flex he liked to tell over dinner. There are tales of garage holders being treated like royalty in even the smallest villages. There are also tales of them being robbed, mistaken for spies, or thrown into wells. You try to avoid eye contact with every stranger for the rest of the day. At the next major station, you get a surprise. Your pouch is being upgraded. The station master, a man with an eagle tattoo and the voice of a disapproving uncle, hands you a new satchel made of red leather, embossed with the symbol of the Empire. "You're on diplomatic delivery now," he says, like it's both an honor and a punishment. Inside are multiple letters addressed to officials across the western provinces. A circuit route, the kind that takes weeks. You nod, trying not to look like you just aged 3 years internally. You leave at dawn, again. And here's where things get interesting. Somewhere between stations, a sandstorm hits. It starts as a whisper of dust, then a full-body slap of wind. Blobless him digs in his hooves and faces it like a grumpy rock. You pull your cloak over your face, clutch the pouch, and crouch low in the saddle. Visibility drops to nothing. Just you, the wind, and a voice in your head saying, you could have been a potter, or a turnip farmer. The sandstorm lasts an hour. Maybe 3. Hard to tell when your teeth are full of grit and your horse is navigating purely by spite. Eventually, it clears. You're alive. Plot is covered in sand. Your pouch is intact. The red silk letter has somehow migrated into your boot. Of course. You ride into the next station like a creature risen from a myth, dusty, wide-eyed, clutching imperial secrets. The station crew gives you water, soap, and a bed made of something softer than hope. You don't ask questions. You just sleep. Because tomorrow, there's another stretch of road. And another story in your saddlebag. You wake up groggy and mildly confused, like a man who fell asleep in the 13th century and dreamed about indoor plumbing. A scribe gently nudges your foot with a stick. You're drooling on the royal satchel, he says with the same tone one might use for you set fire to the monastery. You wipe your face, mutter an apology, and resecure the satchel. The red silk scroll is back where it belongs, though you could swear it's moved again. Maybe it's cursed. Or just passive-aggressive. Outside, the world has changed. You're no longer in the empty steppe. The region here is busier, more developed. Stone buildings instead of yurts. Paved roads in some places. And more eyes on you than you're used to. Merchants peer from behind stalls. Scribes wander past with arms full of papyrus and wax tablets. Somewhere, a chicken is conducting a loud solo. This is one of the Empire's regional hubs, and it hums with quiet authority. As you get your horse ready, plod now wearing a saddle that doesn't creak like a haunted door, a woman approaches. She's tall, wrapped in a blue shawl, and carrying a scroll case marked with 3 red lines. You blink. That's double imperial priority. She hands it to you. For the surveillance office in Khotan, she says. Do not delay, and do not drop it. Then she walks away. You look at the case. It's unusually heavy. A soft rattle inside suggests tiny wooden sticks, or perhaps beans with delusions of grandeur. You're not sure what to think, until another writer leans over and whispers, surveillance logs. Spies reports. They track dissidents, tax dodgers, even grain smugglers. One man got arrested because he overcharged for turnips. So, yes. The EM also functioned as a spy network. The Mongol Empire didn't just move mail. It moved intelligence. Reports about governors, troop movements, rumors of rebellion, all carried by writers like you. Genghis Khan understood that conquest was just the beginning. Control required information. And information required messengers who could ride, keep their mouths shut, and not open scrolls labeled "Do Not Drop." Historians still argue how centralized this surveillance really was. Some believe local officials ran their own networks, with couriers merely acting as conduits. Others think there was a master ledger somewhere in Karakorum, listing every suspicious goat herder and tax discrepancy from here to Hungary. One fringe theory claims that some scrolls were written in invisible ink using fermented rhubarb juice. No one's found a surviving example, but you kind of hope it's true. Rhubarb deserves more respect. You begin your journey westward again, this time with 2 official packets, 3 bruises, and a growing sense that everyone is watching. Every village feels more suspicious. You pass through one where the postmaster greets you with a bow, then immediately walks off with your horse for inspection. He returns at minutes later with a new saddlebag that feels just a little too balanced. You're probably carrying something extra now. It's fine. Everything's fine. The surveillance wing of the YAM was subtle. Messages marked only by thread color or tiny wax impressions. Couriers rarely knew the content. You were trusted to ride, not to understand. Still, you wonder. Later that day, you meet another courier headed east. He's bandaged, tired, and riding a mule that looks about 5 minutes from retirement. You exchange news over a shared hunk of bread. There's unrest in the west, he mutters. Too many taxes, not enough grain. The letters I carried, full reports. They're watching everyone now. You nod slowly. It makes sense. With an empire this large, built on so many cultures, stability is an illusion only speed can preserve. That's why you exist. That's why the YAM is the Empire's best kept secret. It's not about letters. It's about surveillance, reach, and reaction time. At dusk, you reach a checkpoint. Unusual. Most routes are open, but this one has guards, 2 soldiers, a clerk, and a hawk perched ominously on a branch nearby. They stop you, ask your name, then inspect your courage. It shines in the setting. Sun, reflecting their uncertainty back at them. The clerk finally nods and waves you through, but not before glancing once at just one seat, the red silk scroll. You ride on. Past rocky hills, past fields of barley, past a boy flying a kite shaped like a horse. The air smells of sage and tension. That night, at the station, you finally relax. Sort of. You sit with 3 other couriers in a circle by the fire. One is carving tiny figures from bone. Another is heating tea in a dented kettle. The third, older than the hills, simply stares into the flames and mutters about wolves that deliver letters. The conversation turns, as it always does, to the weirdest things ever carried. One time, the bone carver says, I delivered a letter that was just a drawing of a turnip. That's it. No words. I once carried a scroll filled with jokes, says the tea maker. Literal punchlines, for a Khan who wanted to lighten the mood of war. The old man just says, I carried silence once. You all fall. Quiet. Not sure if he's joking or not. Probably not. Your dreams that night are full of shadows. Eyes in windows. Scrolls with moving ink. You wake with the feeling that the Empire is always listening. And sometimes, it listens through you. As you ride on the next day, the thought lingers. Not every scroll is a message. Some are mirrors. And some reflect more than you want to see. You didn't plan on riding into winter, but the Empire doesn't consult weather forecasts or couriers' feelings. The cold has crept in slowly, but decisively, like a bureaucrat with an axe to grind. Your fingers, wrapped in wool and wishful thinking, barely feel the reins. The path ahead narrows. You're entering a mountainous region, now altitude rising, air thinning, the scent of pine replacing the usual sage and dust. The pouch at your side is heavier today. Not in weight, but in consequence. You're carrying 4 scrolls now, 2 of which are wrapped in wax to convey a clear sign that their contents must not get wet, which is unfortunate, because in the distance, the snow has started to fall. You mutter something ancient and impolite under your breath and nudge your horse forward. You switched animals 3 times in 2 days, and this one's Nord is a compact powerhouse who seems perpetually annoyed that you exist. Is sure-footed on the icy trail, though, and that's all that matters. The M never stopped for weather. Snow. Pack your cloak. Rain. Wrap the mail. Blooded river. Swim it or go around, and hope you don't end up delivering frozen scrolls to a very unimpressed governor. There's an old courier saying, if your boots are dry, you're not doing your job right. You pass a weather-beaten milestone stone, one of the ancient markers set by Mongol engineers. These stones track distances between key stations, carved with symbols you've learned to read like road signs. This one means half-day ride to Chitin Post. It also has an unfamiliar glyph scratched beside it, a small spiral. You've seen that spiral before. At the last station, it was scrawled into a bench. Before that, on a crate near the stables. Always small. Always subtle. You try not to think about it too much. But the hairs on your neck do anyway. Historians still argue whether the Yem had encoded navigation system symbols or signs that only couriers could read. There's no surviving handbook. If it existed, it vanished with time or was deliberately erased. Some believe the spirals were a warning. Others say they were used to mark safe paths during seasonal floods. One particularly fringe theory claims they point to hidden stores of tea and fermented plums. You personally hope that one's true. The snow thickens. You squint into the swirling white, coat pulled tight, scrolls pressed close to your chest. You can't afford for them to get wet. The trail curves upward toward a ridge pass, and for a moment you regret every decision that led you here. The wind howls. Snow cuts sideways across your vision like tiny knives. Somewhere behind you, Snort groans in disapproval. Same, buddy. Same. And then, in the middle of a blizzard, you see it. A station. Small, square, dug halfway into the mountain rock. Smoke curls from its chimney. You urge Snort forward, nearly sliding down the path. At the door, a man opens it before you knock. He's wide, wrapped in sealskin. You made it, he blurts incredulous. They said you wouldn't. You stomp snow off your boots. Who said? He shrugs. Everyone. Inside, it's warm, blissfully, impossibly warm. A fire roars in the stone hearth. 2 other couriers are asleep under thick blankets, snoring like synchronized oxen. You hand off one of the scrolls. It's bound in leather, stamped with the mark of the Imperial Census Bureau. The station master eyes it, then tucks it away into a locked chest. Census, he says. They're updating maps again. Changing tech zones. Lots of angry governors lately. You nod. The census scrolls are always tense. Nothing gets a noble more nervous than having their taxable sheep recounted. You eat stew, thick with roots and what you hope is deer. Then you sleep, curled near the fire, the remaining scrolls tucked safely beneath your cloak. You dream of wolves. Not attacking, just watching. From the ridgelines. Each one with a gurge dangling from its neck. In the morning, the storm has passed. The world is white, silent, and glistening. You ride out early, following a trail packed down by the hooves of other couriers. The silence is eerie. No birds. No wind. Just the creak of your saddle and the steady rhythm of breath between you and Snort. You make excellent time until you hit the river. Or, what used to be the river. Now it's a glittering sheet of ice, wide as a field, with just enough mist rising off it to whisper, this will go badly. There's no bridge. Of course there's no bridge. You test the ice with a stick. It cracks, but holds. Snort disagrees with your optimism. It takes a full 5 minutes of bargaining, nudging, and outright lying to convince him to step onto the frozen river. You promise him apples. He knows you're lying, but goes anyway. Halfway across, the ice moans. A deep, resonant sound that seems to come from the bones of the world. You stop breathing. Snort stops walking. The ice holds. You make it across. Snort immediately tries to run into a snowdrift to express his frustration. You let him. He deserves it. That night, the station is a cave. Literally. Carved into a rock face, with a fire pit and a stack of dried mushrooms for dinner. The courier there is blind in one eye, and spends most of the evening polishing his old gurge. It's bronze, pitted with age. 30 winters, he says. That's how long I rode. Before they told me I was too slow to carry soup, let alone secrets. You sip your mushroom tea and nod respectfully. His gaze catches the firelight, casting shadows on the cave walls like ancient ghosts. He eyes your silver one, not with envy, but with memory. They used to give us 2 horses per leg, he adds. Now they're lucky to feed one. The empire stretches farther every year, but the roads get thinner. You wonder if he's exaggerating. Or if maybe the yam really is changing. The polished gears of the great machine now grinding a little more slowly, a little more loudly. You sleep lightly that night. The cave breathes around you. At some point, the wind slips in and rattles a chime made of old metal harness buckles. It sounds like tiny bones whispering stories you're too tired to hear. In the morning, the courier is gone. So is Snort. In his place stands a new horse. Younger. Fitter. With a note tied to the reins, his less dramatic than Snort. Don't waste him. You don't ask questions. You just ride. The horse's name, you decide, is Maybe. Not because he's indecisive, far from it. He's bold, confident, and moves like a gust of wind with legs. No, you call him Maybe because every time you approach a turn, a narrow bridge, or a suspiciously shallow-looking stream, he gives you a look that clearly says, maybe he'll cross this, maybe I won't. Depends on my mood. Still, he runs like he's got something to prove. Today's stretch is flatter thankfully and the wind is calmer. You're heading into one of the more administratively important zones of the Empire, which means a whole lot of paperwork awaits. At the next major yam station, you find exactly what you expect. Scrolls stacked in wooden bins, scribes muttering at each other, and one man loudly arguing with a goose. You hand over your previous scrolls. In return, they give you a new one, sealed with red wax and stamped with a symbol you recognize from your worst memories, the tax bureau. Oh no, you say under your breath. Oh yes, the scribe replies cheerfully. Audit notices. 4 of them. And a grain shipment complaint. You tuck them into your pouch with all the enthusiasm of a man picking up a bag of rocks. It's at this moment you realize, you are no longer a courier delivering messages. You are the herald of doom. Somewhere out there, 4 governors are about to find out their bookkeeping is under scrutiny, and you are the human envelope carrying that unpleasant surprise. Still, you ride. That's your job. The path takes you past farmland, vast stretches of winter wheat, with peasants bundled in layers, squinting at you as you pass. They know what a courier means. News. Change. Sometimes trouble. Occasionally imperial mandates that ruin everyone's week. Historians still argue whether the yam helped unify or intimidate the empire. Some claim it was a force for cohesion, keeping the distant parts of the realm connected and informed. Others believe it served primarily as a top-down control mechanism, sending tax orders and military demands from the center to the farthest reaches. Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe it was just a really efficient way to make sure no one ever relaxed. You arrive at a hilltop post in the late afternoon, where a tired young woman in thick boots takes your horse without a word and tosses you a new Gergethis, one made of iron, and far heavier than the silver one. It clanks ominously against your hip. Special route, she says. Bureaucrat courier run. You're on scroll duty now. Scroll duty. You sigh. That means slower travel but more complex stops. You'll be delivering messages not just to stations but to specific scribes, councils, even tax counters. It's like becoming a glorified errand boy for an office that smells of ink and passive aggression. At your next stop, you do exactly that, march up a narrow stairway into a regional revenue office, knock politely, and are immediately glared at by a man who looks like he's been scowling since birth. Inspection orders, you say, holding out the scroll. He grabs it, breaks the wax, reads half a line, then sighs deeply into his paperwork. You again, he mutters. Which is impressive, since you're fairly certain you've never met him before. He hands you a return scroll. Take this back. I'm not redoing last year's accounts. You stare at it. That's not how this works. That's exactly how this works, he replies. And so now you're carrying messages in both directions. Your pouch bulges. You've become the loop in an administrative argument, the medieval version of reply all. Somewhere, in some palace or office yurt, someone believes this process is efficient. One station gives you hot tea with butter. Another gives you a list of complaints to deliver. You feel less like a courier now, and more like a very tired inbox. There's a peculiar moment at one stop where a monk hands you a message wrapped in a leaf and tied with hair. Do not let it touch iron, he says gravely. You ask no questions. You just carry it delicately like it's going to bite. And of course, something always goes wrong. Late that evening, a scribe at a remote checkpoint insists your garage is a forgery. The iron ones haven't been used in this district since the year of the lame ox, he says, flipping through a ledger the size of a cartwheel. You explain politely, at first, that you were issued this garage just 2 stations back. He shakes his head, insists on a written declaration, and makes you wait while he sends someone on foot to verify your story. You sit there for 4 hours, sipping stale tea and listening to the local goats chew paper. Eventually, someone confirms your route. The scribe mutters an apology so vague it might have been a hiccup, and waves you through. You don't even argue. You're too tired. Historians still debate how well the Yem managed record-keeping across regions. Some say it was a marvel of administrative coordination. Others point to inconsistent use of tokens, seals, and gurge designs, suggesting a system always half a step behind itself. You ride out into the evening, maybe's hooves clicking across stone. You wonder how many other couriers are out here tonight, ferrying secrets, audits, and imperial annoyance across the snow. You wonder how many messages disappear. How many are changed? How many make it exactly as intended and still cause chaos? At your final station of the day, you hand off the complaint scroll from the tax bureau. The postmaster reads it, groans, then passes it to a goat. You swear the goat nods. You eat. You sleep. You dream of scrolls unrolling endlessly, full of numbers and angry handwriting. You wake with ink on your hands. You're starting to forget what day it is, or what month, or if your knees were always this noisy. But you're still writing. Today's leg is different. You're heading to the borderlands, the Empire's frayed edges, where Mongol control fades into something a little fuzzier, a little more multilingual. Your job? Deliver a packet to a foreign envoy. Not Mongol. Not exactly friendly, either. The station master hands you the scroll with both hands and a warning look. Do not read it, do not hit, breaks. You've never liked delivering foreign mail. Too many customs. Too many greetings. Too many chances for someone to get offended because you didn't bow at the right angle or bring the right kind of dried fish. But this scroll is marked with dual seals, Mongol and Persian. That means you're not just a courier now. You're international. Historians still argue whether the Mongol postal system worked outside the empire's heartlands, or if it relied on a patchwork of local alliances and bribes. Some claim there was a unified network stretching from China to Constantinople. Others think the Mongols just bullied local rulers into lending their own infrastructure. Honestly, after using an outhouse in Bukhara that was also a pigeon coop, you suspect it was a little of both. You ride west toward the Okus River, the air warmer now, and the terrain dustier. Flat stretches of cracked earth give way to grooves of date palms and stone towers topped with strange flags. The architecture changes. The bread improves. You've crossed into another cultural zone. At one town, a boy tries to sell you a goose. Not a goose. The goose, he says. You don't ask questions. You just give him a dried plum and keep moving. Eventually, you reach the foreign quarter, a shaded cluster of buildings where banners flap in multiple alphabets. Your destination is a tiled courtyard guarded by two men in chainmail and suspicion. You flash your garage. They squint. Then one nods and disappears. You wait. And wait. Finally, a robed man with ink-stained fingers appears. He accepts the scroll without comment, breaks the seal, reads, then raises an eyebrow so slowly it feels like a sunrise. You are very punctual, he says. You blink. Thank you. You will take a reply. Of course you will. He disappears again, and 15 minutes later he returns with a scroll wrapped in velvet. It smells faintly of cardamom and possibly treason. You don't ask. Later, at the station, the local scribe insists on recording your delivery in 3 separate ledgers in Mongol, 1 Persian, one that just seems to be a list of his personal enemies. He also offers you coffee. Actual coffee. You drink it, and your soul briefly leaves your body. That night, you ride under stars. You're no longer following the standard Yem road. This is a hybrid routeless organized, more delicate. Your guide is a string of landmarks passed down by word of mouth. The well with the leaning post, the tree with 2 trunks, the rock that looks like a sheep but is definitely a rock. One time, you get turned around and end up in a melon field. You apologize to the farmer. He gives you a melon anyway. It's oddly moving. You stop at a trader's house for rest. No formal station here, just a friend of the system. He doesn't ask what you carry. Just pours you a bowl of lamb stew and says, your kind keeps the empire from tearing like an old boot. You want to laugh, but is not wrong. Because out here, in the borderlands, the Yem is more than mail. It's reputation. It's diplomacy. It's one empire telling another, we're still paying attention. Some letters you deliver are just polite acknowledgments. Others are trade permits. A few are dangerous, like the one you carry now, which bears the mark of a disputed silver mine. You hand it off to a tax officer who looks like he chews pebbles for fun. He reads it, sighs, and mutters, this again. You don't stick around. Historians debate whether the Yam helped prevent wars or just delayed them. It certainly carried enough demands, ultimatums, and veiled insults. One scroll allegedly said, we send you greetings and also suggest you stop moving your goats across our border or else we'll move them permanently. Charming. You deliver a message to a caravan master near Samarkand. He reads it and starts shouting orders before you've even had a sip of water. Apparently, the scroll just confirmed a massive shipment of tea had cleared customs. You're a hero now. You get actual cake. It's dates, nuts, and honey. You briefly ascend to a higher plane of existence. But not for long. Because the next scroll is bound in black cord. A rare mark. High secrecy. No stops. No diversions. You tuck it inside your shirt. The next leg is the hardest. Rocky paths. Sandstorms. At one point, a goat tries to follow you. You name him Y, and after 20 minutes of bleeding, he disappears. You ride through an abandoned fortress, stones crumbling like dried bread, and think, this was once part of the empire. Now it's just a backdrop for birds. You sleep under the stars. You count constellations that don't have names in your language. You feel small and necessary at the same time. And when you finally hand off that black-corded scroll into the hands of a scribe surrounded by silence, you don't ask what's in it. Because sometimes the mail isn't about knowing. It's about trust. And hooves on stone. And a system that still works, even out here, where maps get blurry. You're still writing. Because that's what you do. And today, you're thinking about failure. Not your hopefully not, but the systems. Because despite the polish of the garage, the careful scrolls, the roaring fires at major stations, sometimes things still go wrong. And when they do, no one talks about it. Not officially, anyway. You're following a route that cuts through an old gorge narrow, shadowed, with cliffs rising on both sides like ancient teeth. The wind funnels through it with a low, mournful whine, like the gorge itself is warning you to turn around. You keep going. You've heard rumors of this stretch. They call it the Pouch Eater's Pass. Charming. There's a tale every courier hears eventually, usually whispered over stale tea or strong arag. The story of a rider who vanished, pouch and all, somewhere between two mountain stations. No wreckage. No horse. Just gone. Another says they found the mailbag days later hanging from a tree, intact. Still sealed. Contents never disclosed. Historians still argue whether the Mongol Postal system had contingency plans for lost mail. Some say each scroll was duplicated at dispatch. Others insist no copies were made intentional, to protect sensitive information. There's even a theory that certain messages were spoken to memory keepers, then burned, leaving no paper trail. No one knows for sure. But you do know this. Mail gets lost. Sometimes it's weather. Floods, landslides, sudden storms. A courier swept down a ravine. A scroll soaked into pulp. A horse spooked by lightning and gone forever, along with your letter to the grain ministry. Other times, it's theft. The empire is vast. And not everyone loves its reach. There are rebels, bandits, angry governors, and bored teenagers. And scrolls, especially wrapped ones, sealed Westos, look valuable. At one station, a clerk shows you a pouch gnawed clean through. Foxes, he says, then pauses. Or people pretending to be foxes. You nod slowly. Sure. That makes sense. The next day, you see something on the trail, scraps of parchment scattered like petals, curling in the dust. Not yours. Not today. But they were someone's. One piece has a single word still legible, Kaiva. You don't stop. You just ride on. It gets you thinking what happens when a letter doesn't arrive. Maybe nothing. Maybe someone waits an extra day for tax forms. But maybe a marriage is delayed. A siege begins too early. An envoy never reaches the gates. A Khan waits for news that never comes. The empire hums on, mostly. But every lost pouch is a dropped stitch in the grand tapestry. And you, now, are responsible for not adding to that unraveling. So, you double knot your satchel. You sleep with it under your head. And every few miles, you pat it like a nervous parent. Some couriers are more superstitious than others. You've met ones who tie a strip of red silk to their reins. Others carry a carved bone in the shape of a bird, said to guide lost messages home. You've even seen a man who sings to his scrolls, softly, as he rides. It's oddly calming. There's an open question among couriers, mostly rhetorical. If you lose a letter, do you confess? Some say yes. Report it. Be honest. Accept your punishment, maybe a fine, maybe a new route to somewhere colder. Others say no. Quietly disappear. Ride on to the next post, and pretend nothing happened. You haven't had to decide. Yet. But as the wind picks up, and the canyon opens into a dry plain littered with abandoned stone pillars, you realize, the system survives not because of perfection, but because of momentum. It keeps moving. It absorbs its own errors. Like a river, it flows around what it loses and keeps going. That night, you reach a remote station, and of the oldest, they say. The walls are thick, built of stone instead of wood. There's no fire. Just a single lantern and a keeper who looks more like a monk than a postmaster. He takes your scroll, doesn't say a word, and vanishes inside. You sit alone under the stars, watching the silhouettes of ancient yaks grazing on wind-blasted grass. The silence settles into your bones. You think about the letters that vanish. About the secrets lost between station and step. You wonder how many decisions were made in the absence of a scroll. You wonder how different the world might have been because someone missed the handoff. Because a writer never made it through the storm. Because a fox, or a thief, or just the cruel joke of fate got there first. And yet you're still here. Still writing. Still carrying words not yours, on roads not yours, in service of something so much bigger than any one courier. You fall asleep with the stars watching. The wind tucks you in. You wake to the sound of pots clanking, and someone softly cursing at a stubborn donkey. It's not poetic, but it is familiar. You stretch, brush sleep from your eyes, and glance at your satchel still sealed, still here, still unnervingly quiet. You never quite trust it until you see it with your own eyes each morning. Today's road curves southward toward a set of river crossings and lowland way stations. Your updated assignment includes a list of inspection letters, 2 trade agreements, and somehow a wedding invitation. Yes, even imperial marriages oversee deadlines. But what catches your attention is the name scrawled in smaller script near the bottom, Saran. You know that name. Not from a scribe, or a clerk, or a Khan. You know it from other couriers. Stories told around campfires. Whispers at the stations. Saran is a woman who runs one of the most remote posts in the Empire, nestled in a wind-battered past nobody visits twice unless they have to. She's also, allegedly, terrifying. You set out early, the sun rising low and golden behind you. Your new horsey speckled gray with the personality of a suspicious librarian you name Lint. He seems unimpressed by your authority, but at least he walks in a straight line. The path takes you through a patchwork of settlements. Here, the yam posts are less like stations and more like lintas tacked onto merchant homes or smithies. Still, the system holds. People expect you. They feed you. They ask no questions about the scrolls, though they always glance at them as if trying to divine their contents by proximity. Then you reach a station like none you've ever seen. A small valley opens before you, barely more than a dent in the hills, but nestled in its crook is a cluster of wooden structures, smoke drifting from chimneys. There are 2 paddocks, a water wheel, and a pen of loudly opinionated chickens. And at the center is the post. You dismount. Before you can knock, the door opens. There she is, Saran. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a heavy wool cloak and glaring at you like you just stepped on her dog. You're late, she says, though you're actually 2 hours early. You start to explain, but she waves you inside. The interior is Spartan bedrolls, a rack of scrolls, a kettle boiling on a metal stove. She takes your pouch, opens it with a snap, and begins to sort through the scrolls. You hesitate. Isn't that supposed to be for the recipients only? She snorts. I am the recipient. These are my region. I run the southern routes. You bring the scrolls, I make sure they end up in the right hands. She pauses over the wedding invitation. Again, she mutters. That boy gets married more than he does inventory checks. You sit. She pours tea. Over the next hour, you learn more about how the yam really runs than from any imperial training session. Turns out, people like Saran are the glue. She's not just a station keeper. She's a logistics officer, a counselor, a spy when needed, and occasionally a midwife. She knows which horses are going lame, which roads are sinking, which couriers are skimming from the grain allotments. Historians still argue whether women had official authority in the yam system or operated entirely in the shadows. Some records mention female station managers, especially in family-run posts. Others dismiss it as rare exceptions. But if Saran is an exception, she doesn't act like it. She acts like someone who keeps the empire from falling into a puthole the size of Persia. Later, as you saddle up to leave, she hands you 2 more scrolls. These go to the river offices. Don't let the scribes confuse you. They'll talk circles until you sign your soul away for a bowl of rice. You nod. Then she pauses. And courier, yes, don't trust the man at station 82. He always asks what's in the mail. Never trust the ones who ask. You ride out in silence, the weight of her warning sticking to your ribs like old stew. That evening, you reach a village near the riverbank. The station is modest, a low building, 1 lantern swinging from the porch beam, and 2 overworked clerks snoring in tandem on a bench. You knock. Nothing. You knock again. Eventually, a bleary-eyed man opens the door, blinking like you personally invented mornings. He grumbles as you hand him the scrolls. Then just as Saran gestures toward a desk with 2 ink pots, a bowl of something steaming, and a ledger. Sign, he says. Well, mark them received. You narrow your eyes. You sign. Am the courier. He pauses. Then smiles. One of her messengers. You nod. Yes. She says hello. He chuckles, signs the ledger, and slides you the bowl. It's rice. Not poisoned, as far as you can tell. That night, you sleep in the stable. It smells like hay, old horses, and secrets. You wonder how many women like Saran exist in this system. Unnamed in scrolls, unpainted in history. Holding the lines together with collused hands and fierce stares. The empire is big, but some of its strongest posts are built from people like her. You ride into dawn with a pouch that hums with tension. 3 scrolls today. One is sealed in blue wax, a color of peace treaties, land negotiations, and subtle threats disguised as polite suggestions. Another is marked with the twin dragon emblem of the Kagan's military council. And the last, a simple wedding invitation, now creased from all the times you've nearly sat on it. The Mongol Empire is nothing if not versatile in its correspondence. Your destination this time is a border fort. Not just any outpost, but a hybrid beast, half barracks, half bureaucratic hive, with war drums and ledgers sharing the same courtyard. These are the places where diplomacy and destruction sleep back to back, and you're the mailman trading gingerly between their pillows. As you trot closer, you hear it before you see it, the clang of metal, the whistle of drills, the dull thunk of arrows biting wood targets. War lives here not in theory, not on paper, but in calloused hands, split lips, and the endless sharpening of blades. You flash your courage at the gate. The guards let you in with a nod. One of them says, "Hope it's not bad news this time." You don't answer. You never do. You just carry. Inside the command tent, the general barely looks up as he takes the military scroll, breaks the seal, and begins to read. His brows rise. He grunts. "Change in deployment," he mutters, "not to you. They're pulling my second unit for river duty. Idiots." You hand him the treaty scroll next. He opens it. Reads. Then sighs. This again. You blink. He looks at you. We've been negotiating that past your border for 5 years. Every season someone grazes 2 yaks too far west, and we get a whole new treaty with 5 new clauses. He signs the attached receipt with a dagger. You're dismissed. Next door, in a low-roofed administrative tent, you deliver the wedding invitation. The recipient, a junior officer with a nervous mustache, blushes furiously. Is there a +1? He asks. You shrug. Try not to bring your horse this time. War and Peace housed in neighboring tents. That's your Tuesday. Historians still debate how much the Mongol Empire relied on couriers for real-time decisions in war. Some argue the yam was too slow to influence battles. Directly orders could take days, weeks to arrive. Others point to precisely timed cavalry movements, suggesting a system so efficient it could alter troop paths mid-campaign. A fringe theory even claims that Genghis Khan once won a skirmish by sending fake scrolls via his own couriers to confuse enemy spies. There's no hard evidence, but it's the kind of story that makes you double-check your pouch every hour. You leave the fort before lunch, riding north now, into quieter territory. The fields stretch golden in the sun. You pass shepherds, traders, even a group of children chasing a dog with a ribbon on its tail. Then, a crossroads. One path leads to the capital. One leads to the Lake Provinces. The third, a narrow trail disappearing into the trees, leads to a monastery. And that's your route. You arrive at the monastery just before sundown. Bells ring softly from the towers. Monks move like drifting smoke. You're offered barley tea, and a place to sit beneath a carved wooden beam. Older than most countries. Your pouch stays sealed until the abbot arrives, sentient, silent, eyes like wells. You hand him a scroll wrapped in plain linen. He accepts it with both hands, bows, and says only, "This is peace, for now." You think about that sentence the whole night. Because sometimes your job is to carry a declaration of war. Other times, it's to deliver an olive branch wrapped in wool. And occasionally, rarely, you carry both at once. After supper, you sit beside the fire with a young monk who asks you if the empire ever feels heavy on your back. You smile and show him your calusas. He nods. You carry swords, he says. But also weddings. Sometimes both in the same scroll, you reply. He laughs quietly. History must be confused. Yes, you say, and I think that's why it keeps repeating itself. Before bed, you help a scribe bind a packet of letters. They're not official. They're personal messages from monks to family far away. You weren't required to carry them, but you tuck them into your satchel anyway. Because sometimes, peace isn't in the trees. It's in the handwriting. The next morning, you ride out with the dawn. A pigeon launches from the rooftop above you and wheels into the sky. You carry words meant to protect and to destroy. And as the miles fall away under Maba's hooves, you feel the weight of both. The road ahead is quieter now. Less traffic. Fewer carts. The trees on either side are growing wild again, pushing back against civilization as if trying to erase it one root at a time. You ride a narrower path, a little overgrown, a little less traveled. This was once a major line of the Yam. Now, it feels like the Empire forgot about it. The stations are farther apart here. The waymarkers are cracked. You pass one so weathered it looks more like a crooked tooth than a milestone. The inscription, if there ever was one, is long gone. You glance back once, out of habit, then press on. You're heading into a region that used to hum with Mongol command, an area with trading posts, staging grounds, military drill zones. Now it's fading. The Empire's edge is moving on, and you can feel the retreat in your bones. At your next station, a thatch-roofed hut propped up with uneven beams, there's no one to greet you. Just an old tether post, a cold fire pit, and a note carved into the doorframe in neat blocky script, "Still here. Still riding." You wait. No one comes. You feed your horse. You sip the last of your tea. And then, because the mail waits for no one, you leave a scroll behind tucked into a watertight pouch, hung carefully on the door handle, just in case someone returns. Historians still argue when exactly the Yam began to fray. Some say it was after the empire fractured into separate khanats. Others point to natural disasters, plague years, political infighting. Whatever the case, you're now riding through the ghost of infrastructure an empire once stretched taut, now sagging at the edges. And yet someone still uses this route. You find signs. Hoof prints, boot scuffs, a broken harness strap freshly tossed into a bush. Someone passed through here recently. Maybe another courier. Maybe someone else. A few hours later, you reach a fork in the path. There's no marker. No sign. Just instinct. You veer left. The forest thickens. Eventually, you reach the next post. This one is in bad shape. Half the roof is missing. The walls lean like they are whispering secrets. But there's smoke rising. Someone is inside. You dismount. Approach carefully. Inside, an old man stirs something over a small fire. He looks up as you enter and grins without teeth. Well, look at that, he says. The Empire remembers I exist. You hand him your pouch. He sorts through the scrolls, chuckling occasionally, shaking his head at others. I used to get 2 couriers a day here, he says. Now I'm lucky to see 1 a week. You nod. Most of the routes have shifted west. He waves a scroll like a fleshwater. And with them, the power. But someone still has to deliver the letters to the forgotten. He makes space near the fire. You sit, accept a tin mug of broth that tastes like onions and Empire. That night, he tells stories. Of the time he ran routes in the high mountains and had to outrun a rock slide. Of the woman who once delivered a love letter that accidentally started a border skirmish. Of the prince who disguised himself as a courier for a month, just to understand what it meant to be useful. You ask if any of it is true. He shrugs. Does it matter? In the morning, you check your pouch. 2 scrolls left. 1 bound in string. 1 loose. You saddle up, ready to go. Before you leave, the old man hands you a worn ribbon blue, with faded embroidery. For luck, he says. And so they know someone still believes in the road. You tie it to your reins. And you ride on. Down a road cracked with age. Past villages that look more memory than map. Past a child playing with a wooden wheel who stops to salute as you pass. The yem isn't gone. Not yet. It breathes, slow and quiet, like an old horse dreaming of galloping again. You are part of that dream. And your hoofbeats wake it, 1 station at a time. You feel it before you see it. That small, prickling tension in the air like someone watching you from the tree line, like your pouch is heavier than usual. And the road ahead, flat and well-traveled just yesterday, now seems unusually empty. No carts. No herders. Not even a pigeon. You tug gently on your reins. Maybe snorts. This is the part of the job no one talks about, the part where the mail becomes dangerous. Not because of weather, or wolves, or ghosts, although you've heard some unnervingly consistent stories, but because of people. You're carrying high-value scrolls again. 2 are stamped with royal seals. 1 is marked for a provincial governor known more for tax extortion than hospitality. And another, sealed with plain wax, no insignia, just a faint scent of cinnamon and ink. That one makes you nervous. It's known across the yam. Some messages are meant to be read by everyone. Others, by no one. And a very specific few are not even meant to be carried. They're traps. Fists. Bait. At your next station, a wayhouse near a bend in the river, you find something wrong. It's too clean. No dust. No ash in the hearth. The horse trough is full, but the hay hasn't been touched. A meal half-eaten sits abandoned on the table. Still warm. You don't call out. You dismount. Quietly. You slide the scroll pouch under your coat. You look for sign, hoof prints, drag marks, blood. Nothing. Just silence, sharpened. Then you hear it. A creak, far too slow and deliberate to be the wind. You turn, heart thudding like a war drum, and spot the figure. A man steps out from the trees. Dust-colored robes, short beard, sword at his side, but not drawn. Courier, he says, voice calm. You nod. Heading west. You say nothing. He walks closer. They say you carry letters, secrets, sometimes coin. His stalling. You know it. You've heard this tone before, seen it in the eyes of desperate men who don't want to rob you, but have already decided they will. You flash your garage, holding it up like a badge. Imperial mail, you say. Interference is treason. He laughs. Not mockingly, genuinely. Treason, he says. There's no empire out here anymore. Historians still argue whether banditry on the Yam routes was widespread or isolated. Some records report full-on mail theft rings operating under rogue officials. Others insist those were propaganda, written to justify crackdowns. One legend tells of a courier who vanished with 12 royal edicts, and was later found running a tea shop. Every customer served a different policy. He tense. Wait for the man to step closer. But then he sighs. Turns. I've been a courier too, he says over his shoulder. A long time ago. He disappears into the trees. You wait another minute, then 2. Then you enter the station. It's empty. You feed the fire, eat the half-cold meal. You leave a mark on the wall for the next rider, a single horizontal slash. Caution. Not danger. Not yet. Later that day, you pass a checkpoint guarded by two teenage recruits trying very hard to look intimidating. You show them your documents. One squints. The other asks the usual question, what happens if someone opens the mail? You shrug. Depends who it's addressed to. They look at each other. You ride on. Near sunset, you stop at a roadside shelter to water maybe. Another courier is already there, a wiry woman with a face like chiseled stone. You nod. She nods. No words exchanged. Until she gestures to your pouch. Still carrying the cinnamon one. You freeze. How did you? I passed the scribe who sealed it, she says. He was sweating through his shoes. Said he didn't even read what he wrote. You consider removing it. Tossing it. Burying it in the snow. But you don't. Because your job isn't to understand the mail. It's to deliver it. That night, you sleep uneasily under a sky full of cold stars. You dream of scrolls unrolling into endless paper, of messages that erase themselves as you read them. In the morning, one of the scrolls is missing. Not the cinnamon one. A tax notice. You swear softly, search your pack. Nothing. But pinned to your saddlebag is a note, written in crisp, imperial script. This one was never meant to reach its target. You burn the note. You don't tell anyone. There's no report form for this kind of thing. Historians still argue whether internal sabotage of the YAM was ever a sanctioned act, secret messages intercepted by allies, altered to nudge outcomes. You now suspect the answer is yes. But you'll never admit that aloud. Because some scrolls are just scrolls. And others are matches tucked inside parchment. You check your pouch. Everything's still sealed. And you ride on. The air feels different now. Not colder. Not warmer. Just older, like the wind has been around long enough to judge. You. The dirt on the road is darker. The stations are fewer. You're deep into the return path now, backtracking toward what once felt like the center of the world. Except, with every hoofbeat, you begin to realize something odd. There's no center anymore. At least not like before. The scrolls in your pouch are fewer now, but heavier. One is double wrapped and sealed with a cord of black silk, a rare sign, known to couriers as a message meant only for the highest circle of rulers. You don't know who it's for. You don't want to know. You're just the limbs of the empire, not the eyes. You switch horses at a lonely outpost that no longer smells like fire or bread, just dust and tired wood. The keeper there is new. Yum. Too clean. He asks too many questions. What's in the pouch? Where are you headed? Are you alone? You say very little. Just enough. You don't drink his tea. He stares at your garage longer than necessary. You leave before dark. There's a phrase in the courier world. When the road starts asking questions, it's time to ride faster. So you do. You take an old trail not on most maps anymore. Overgrown. Laced with branches and spider silk. But it's quiet. And forgotten things are often the safest. As you ride, you think about what's waiting ahead. You've been summoned to Karakorum again. That rarely happens for field couriers. A summons means one of two things. You're being promoted. You're being punished. You've delivered too many sensitive scrolls this month to believe it's a coincidence. And you've seen too many patterns in your routes to call it random. At the next major station, the commander meets you directly. He doesn't smile. He barely speaks. Just, you're to report to the capital. Leave all pouches sealed. You nod. He watches you. It's not often they call in someone from the outer YAM. Maybe I got lost, you say. He doesn't laugh. That night, you sleep in a fortified station with stone walls and guards who double knot the stable doors. You dream of scrolls stacked like brick, scrolls that form towers, and towers that collapse. You wake before dawn. The ride to Karakorum is long, but it flows under your hooves like a river made of dust and memory. You pass couriers heading the other way, none of whom meet your eye. As you near the city, you see smoke on the horizon, not fire, just light. Cook fires, workshops, the slow rise of steam from the bathhouses, and spires. The palace district glints like bone polished by centuries. You're stopped at the outer gates, of course. Your pouch is examined. Your garage weighed literally on a brass scale, as if its worth can be measured in grams. The guards speak low and quick, then wave you through with that universal expression that says, "We don't understand your orders, but they're above our pay grade." You're led through a series of narrow alleys and wide courts, past pavilions draped in red and blue silk, into a garden so silent it makes your ears ring. You dismount. Hand off your horse. Walk alone. A tall official meets you at a marble arch. "You've delivered well," he says, flatly. "But your road is changing." You blink. There is unrest in the west. The YAM will be used differently now. Messages are not enough. We need presence. Presence. You'll oversee reconstruction, he says. Stations. Riders. Scribes. You'll ride less. Command more. You want to laugh. But you nod. Because sometimes promotions feel like exile in finer clothing. You're given quarters. A new gurge, heavier, gold inlaid, shaped like a wheel. You're told it's the rarest kind, one used only by those who can authorize new stations. You turn it in your palm. It feels cold. That night, as you settle into your new quarters, you unpack your satchel. But something's missing. The black silk scroll. Gone. In its place, a slip of parchment, barely wider than your finger. It says, you were never carrying it. You sit down. You breathe. You realize you've been delivering less information lately on more intentions. Shaping routes. Visiting regions no one else had visited in months. Stirring certain people. Distrusting others. You were the message. You were the signal. And now, you are the system. Historians still argue whether the yam was a courier service, or a method of control disguised as communication. Whether couriers merely delivered power, or became power moving through the empire like veins carry blood, unseen but essential. You stare at your new garage. And somewhere out on a cracked road, a courier rides past a forgotten station. Still carrying. Still believing. Because the empire hasn't ended. It's just shifted. The last light of your journey stretches before you like a fading ribbon worn, frayed, but stubbornly refusing to disappear. You ride through familiar landscapes now, passing stations that still cling to life, a handful of couriers sharing tired smiles and nods of recognition. The yam isn't what it was, but it's still here. Still moving. Your horse, maybe, carries you steadily as you approach the outskirts of a town that once bustled with activity but now whispers only memories. Children play amid the ruins of a stable, the wind carries the scent of wild flowers and old wood. At the final station before your homeward rest, you hand over your pouch with a quiet sense of completion. The scribe takes it carefully, eyes heavy but respectful. This one made it, he says simply. You nod, feeling the weight of every mile behind you, not just the physical miles but the unseen ones carried by words, secrets, hopes, and fears. The journey is more than the sum of its parts. It's the cadence of hooves in the night, the rustle of parchment, the unspoken trust between stranger and empire. You think back on everything you've seen, the frozen passes, the storm-ravaged plains, the sly glances of bandits, the kindness of strangers, the steely resolve of women like Saren, the silent prayers whispered over every sealed scroll. The yam is more than a postal system. It is the empire's heartbeat, sometimes faltering, sometimes strong, always enduring. You settle in for your last night on the road. The fire crackles softly. Outside, the night breathes a cool, steady hum. You close your eyes and listen to the rhythm of the world. Maybe the next writer will be faster. Maybe the next scroll will carry peace. Maybe the empire will remember. And maybe, just maybe, the roads will never truly fall silent. Slowly, your breathing matches the soft fan's hum in the background. The stars wink overhead, guardians of journeys past and futures yet unwritten. Tonight, you rest. The letters sleep. The horses dream. And the road waits. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together.